think for us, like the purpose is the process. I think the addiction that we have is like the being on set and the high that gives you, the kind of like text to image AI model. It's like a little bit of like a slot machine. It's like hit the button again. There's this like addictive quality. And so without that like interface with like the limitations of the world, like you're never gonna get that thing that is more than the sum of its parts.
Alex Takacs, famously known as Young Replicant, is our guest today, and boy do we cover a lot. From AI and its ever-growing influence on the industry to finding your voice as a filmmaker. I even asked him what he thought about the unspoken hierarchy that a director has on set.
It's not a democracy. It's not a committee. It's more mysterious than that. You know, there's people who say, you know, like it's a dictatorship. But I don't believe that. At the end of the day, it's like the director who's on the hook. If things don't work out, if the idea does not gel, like you're culpable for that.
I'd consider Alex's work to be a sort of masterclass in visual metaphor. Wrapped in this naturalistic aesthetic, it often offers an intimate view of humanity. His work to me just feels organic. And being the poetic creator that he is, I wasn't afraid to get philosophical. And of course, neither was he. You know, I mean, maybe we're looking into it too much, because here's the thing. Maybe. Do you think Torment belongs in the process of making something good?
The older I get, and the more I do this, the less it affects me. But there's no art without some sort of sacrifice.
We broke down what I think is one of the most beautiful commercials I've ever seen, and how he was able to craft it with a specialized crew in Thailand, while silently enduring the health scare of his life.
Once you have it, it's like a death sentence. But I couldn't tell anybody about it. It was too crazy. Like the thought that this could be my last shoot.
Alex Takacs, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I want to get into who you are and what you're about. But before that, I want to just jump into your work for a minute. I mean, you've been creating highly elevated cinematic work for a minute now. I mean, you directed Lovely Blood Flow for Baths over 13 years ago in 2010, Purity Ring, Fine Shrine in 2012, Fiction for the Double X in 2013. Do you feel like you've come a long way in the past 10 to 15 years?
I think creatively, spiritually, you know, I've like the evolution of the work. I've definitely evolved. But yeah, I don't know. It depends on what you mean by come a long way. You know, you're talking about like from like a career standpoint or just...
It's all, I mean, what does that come down to? It comes down to how we view ourselves, right? And what we hold high in terms of accomplishments, and what, you know, what do you value in terms of your accomplishments when it comes to your work?
Well, I definitely have like a lot of, like I value the experience that I have, because, you know, it's sort of like 10 years, more than 10 years, sort of like in the trenches, you know, working on mostly music videos, a lot of commercials too, but I feel like mostly like my work, or people know of me through music videos, so that's always been kind of like my main creative outlet, you know, more so than commercial work. That's like starting to change, I think, and that's sort of like my goal at the moment, is to kind of sort of shift, to sort of like take the sort of taste and sort of personality that I've been able to put into the music videos and kind of translate it into the commercial space. So that's kind of what I'm about now.
I want to just talk about visually your work for a second, because I noticed that you seem to like to stay out of the studio. And I can honestly relate to this, but when I look at your body of work, it seems that you're drawn to more naturalistic environments opposed to studio environments. Like if Alex is going to pick something, if it's up to him, it's going to be an empty field or the interior of an old house over something like a custom-built set with lights and restrooms nearby.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's always been like, you know, on location, really difficult locations, a lot of locations. That's always been sort of the kind of hallmark of my style, has always been like very elaborate narratives, um, lots of different places, all in sort of the same video, um, which is sort of like, I used to sort of see it as a defect and a sort of like a flaw. Like why can't I just do the simple 1 day shoot in the studio? Like why can't my brain like come up with something that like works for that? Um, but sort of over time, I've kind of developed this kind of resignation, or sort of made peace with the fact that that's just a part of my sort of unique voice. People always say like, find your voice, and you're like, that's the hardest thing, and it's like the most annoying thing to hear, um,
Yeah.
because it's very difficult to sort of. But I think that those things are actually part of that. I've kind of come to realize that, um, like the complexity of the narrative, sometimes the logistical complexity of my work is just sort of part of it, and like all the flaws that engenders. Like, you sometimes, I'm often wishing like, oh, I wish we had more time. If we had sat in a studio, we could be playing all day with this or that effect, or, we could have gotten more shots of this, but, instead we're like running around trying to grab the whole, everything. And so it forces a kind of, I don't know, certain stylistic things will sort of like evolve, like emerge from that maybe you didn't intend, but that's still part of your style.
Mm.
I think that's
Yeah.
kind of like, and I've said this before. I said this to Christian, was that like the flaw is that is what makes you unique. It's not the things that you do really well. I mean, that obviously has an effect, but chances are you think you're doing them really well because you're sort of emulating something that you respect, or another filmmaker, something you've seen before, and you're like, okay, this is like, this is how it should be. I've achieved this benchmark or whatever. But in reality, it's like the things that you don't do so well, or the things that the blind spots, those are also very unique to you. And that's what gives your work its unique flavor in a way. So I've
Mm.
like sort of learned over time to like embrace the flaw.
I'm a planner when it comes
Mm,
to my work, but and you have to
I,
be. I know you are too. Um,
yeah.
but are you planning to not? Are you planning to have moments where you make things up? Are you like ha, like did you go through a time where you realized that there's such a thing as planning too much?
Oh yeah, for sure. When I started, it was all about like storyboards. Like admirer of the sort of Ridley Scott method. Like when I was a teenager, that was sort of,
Mm,
how I thought that was like my model for filmmaking, was like, there's this cranky genius who spends all day drawing these like beautiful little drawings, and then it's like a comic book come to life, sort of, like that was how I,
yeah.
sort of saw, like that's how I was able to take my first steps into filmmaking. And that's, I think it gives you confidence. And like when you don't have confidence, you need to have, planning, and
Yes.
be very meticulous. And it's kind of like,
Mm,
yeah, and then you start to build a little bit of momentum, and you realize like, okay, maybe I don't need these storyboards. But if you look back at like any of the sort of early music videos I've done, they're almost always to board.
really?
So I did that for many years, and I still do it, but it's much more, it's much looser. I do like thumbnails instead of storyboards.
Yeah.
Um, and even like the storyboard artists that I work with, I finally like found my guy,
Yeah.
and I hit him up on every project because we sort of draw the same, and I sort of see myself in his drawings, and therefore I can be so much more comfortable using the storyboards, because typically you get someone to do it, and it's like, these sort of thick lines, grayscale renderings, really slick, and it sort of alienates you from the material. You're like, ew, like this is gonna, like this is this is gonna be corny or whatever, and everyone's got this like goofy grin on their face, and you know, uh, but the way this guy draws is super loose and sketchy, and it kind of implies like motion, and that's sort of what that kind of goes back to your point about like leaving some gaps. Um, and that's what I try. And yeah, and I definitely have tried to work that into like my methodology is if you're just executing boards and you've planned it out so meticulously that there's no room for the work to speak back to you, then I think you're sort of in trouble because you're not listening anymore. You're not listening to what you're making. You're just kind of, I always say that like anything you can come up with on your own is probably a sort of remix of something that you've seen before. This kind of feeds into this, like sort of AI conversation and how we model consciousness and creativity. But, chances are if you sat in a dark room and wrote something, you're probably like, there's a good chance that you're, I don't know, using tropes, at least. I wouldn't say cliches, but like there's tropes. And so
Yeah.
the only way to kind of like make something new is to let those, whatever you've done, sort of cross-pollinate or uh, let the rubber hit the road and see what happens, see how it's like transforms. You got to find the right level of chaos, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah. It's always chaos.
oh, for sure, yeah.
It wouldn't be a production without chaos.
Hmm.
But yeah, finding the right amount of chaos is an interesting idea.
You're as a director, I think one of your chief, or at least the thing that I like to do is create this sense of like creative conspiracy, like you're trying to bring the people into your world. Like I don't really believe in this kind of like saying like fuck you, like stay at your video village, like that, that sort of attitude of like,
Yeah.
um because it's not helpful. Like I don't think um I'm very sensitive to sort of like the vibes on set, like I don't like creating. This is something I'm working on, is being like okay with conflict, but I like it when things are sort of copacetic. I like to build consensus. That's like sort of like a big thing that I've found to be the most beneficial. Like, instead of trying to assert your authority on other people, it's really about bringing them into the fold, so that like, and I'm sure a lot of other directors will say this too, but you want people to come to the same conclusion you did creatively, but on their own. So if you tell someone to, okay, it has to be like this, because even if you give them the why, chances are they're just gonna, they're still working from the neck down. And it's like you want people to be creatively engaged on this like higher level. So you sort of have to like, you lead them to water, and you try to guide them in subtle ways so
Yeah.
that, they feel like it's their idea as well. And they can see the beauty in it of what you're trying to do. And then suddenly, you've built a consensus, and then you have momentum. For me, it's like it's about building momentum. Um, and if you're fighting with the DP and he doesn't really know what you're doing, and he's just kind of following your, then you're just like there's too much sand in the gears. There's like it's not. You want it to start to like flow, and you want that like excitement to come out, because that's when, that's the high of it. That's the sort of the kind of drug metaphor. That's why you love being on set.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it's for those moments. If you just go and execute the boards, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. You're not going to discover anything better. you know? And I think
Mm.
it's like the things that you didn't plan for are always going to be sort of better, I think. Like I'm always doing this thing where I'll flop all my timeline. I'll just start like flipping shots. DPs hate me for this, but and editors, but I'm always like flop it, just like flip it, because it's like suddenly you're the image that you composed becomes something like alien to you. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's like you're seeing it for the first time again.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, there's less you've added this sort of element of unplannedness.
Do you think, no, no, this is funny. Do you think it's just different to you or anyone else? Because anyone else who hasn't spent time with the image probably doesn't know that it was flipped or not.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just different to you. It's purely like your own perception of the work. But it can kind of bring a because you did frame things, or you were sort of reading the image a certain way on set, and you're following your instincts, and you have to trust your instincts, but at the same time your instincts can like betray you in various ways by pushing you to be more safe, or to frame in a more conventional way or whatever. And then by like flipping it, you're kind of like disrupting that process. You're making a thousand decisions. It's all, obviously directing is mostly like decision making, and that's all you're really there. You're sort of just there to say yes or no to stuff. You're just kind of like, you could literally do nothing but say yes or no, and kind of do the job. Um, but there's like a few decisions where suddenly it's like it's unclear what is the best choice. And I just like to have this kind of deliberation where it's like, well, if we do A, okay, that's interesting. What if we did B? What would it mean if we did B? How does that change things with this other thing? And so it's like, I'm always I always also say that this like not knowing is a key part of the process, and something that I had to kind of learn over time, or become more comfortable with the not knowing. Um, and then also, that it sort of passing that on to your collaborators. It's important to bring in people who are also comfortable with not knowing, who are secure enough in their creative vision that they can walk into a room without knowing something.
I mean, while we're talking about collaboration and what it's like to work with people, you know, people often look at the director so highly, especially when it comes to the hierarchy of how set works. You know, why do you think this is, and how do you go about that?
Um, well, I do, it's not a democracy. It's not a committee. Uh, it is a collaboration. It's more mysterious than that. There's people who say, like it's a dictatorship, but I don't believe that. It's definitely not that. To me, that's like one extreme, and then the other extreme is like, well, it's just it's like a group project. It's not that either, because at the end of the day, it's like the director who's on the hook for everything. It's like it's your ass on the line for, if things don't work out, if the idea does not gel, like, you know you you're culpable for that, which makes it like a very lonely job. And and that's the sort of, I guess, psychologically, you could say, like, why I'm trying to bring people in to the conspiracy, because you want to have, you want buddies, you want
Yeah,
accomplices, you want people to share some of this burden that you have. um and it's definitely true, I'd
yeah,
say, on commercials too, because uh then you're really like, in a music video, you can kind of, it just, there's less pressure, I feel like.
yeah,
um
definitely, definitely.
you can, and it's at least in the moment, you can kind of like defer to later. You're like, well, I think it's working. We'll see when we get, we'll see how
Yeah.
it turns out. But in a commercial, there's more like, did we get it? Did we get is it,
Yeah.
are we hitting the boards? Is it like speaking the brand language? There's all these,
Yeah,
there's a lot.
there's definitely more of like a real-time review as you go along the process for a commercial than, because I mean with music videos, I've shot music videos where I'm halfway through the thing and I'm like, I don't know yet. I don't know if
Yeah,
we got it yet or not. We'll figure it out.
yeah.
We can always move things around and be playful with the edit, but commercials are definitely different.
I think, some like I always talk about the DP director relationship because I think, especially in sort of our line of work, that's the most pivotal, you know? I think
Yeah.
in other forms it's, might be director, writer, or director, producer, showrunner, whatever, but for us it's like the image is so key that, that it is the most important relationship on set. Sometimes you hear stories from, in interviews with directors from sort of previous generations where they're like fighting with their cameraman, and you're just like, how can you make a how do you I can't imagine, working with or like trying to make a film and not being aligned with the DP. It's crazy to me.
Especially when when a lot of money is involved, things are at a really high level. I can't imagine being at odds with crew members that core to the process.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you have the direct, the DP up on the crane and the director
Yeah.
behind the monitor, and they're like not talking. Like it just like, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm always like, you know, that's another thing that bugs me big time is if I'm like we're trying to set up a shot and I can't find the DP, and he's like, where is it? He's like, oh, he's back at the fucking, the at the wheels of the techno crane. Like, dude, like come into the come into the scene, what
Yeah.
step in, like let's find some interesting framing or whatever.
Yeah.
um
No, it's interesting to see the parallel between this naturalistic and intimate style of work that you have and
mhm.
how you aim to carry that same type of thing on how you make it as well, like on set.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude, that's cool. Well, I wanna break down a project of yours. You did this commercial for Bugaboo. It's for a stroller company, right? It's called
Yeah,
Designed for the Future.
yeah.
And it's a really great piece, man. I mean, we featured it on the Frame Set Instagram a few months ago, and I remember just cutting through it and just having a ball curating it for our Instagram viewers and our site, and
Nice.
it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, you. The world is yours, you know. What's it going to be? Will you save it? Shape it? Make it? You just go with the flow or against it. We design for wherever you take it. For day one, for the journey, for the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, dude, before before we dive in, just high level idea. I mean, this is a commercial for a stroller, and it's beautiful and cinematic. It's a thought piece that makes you consider your own existence. You
Mm,
know,
wow.
what do you think? What do you think fuels the demand for commercials this stylized and artistic?
You want to get at something real. Like I think every commercial wants to sort of scratch at something that's like honest and authentic, even in the sort of, with at the same time you have to be aware of what's happening, which is like you're advertising a product. And if you lose that awareness, that can also be bad, I think, personally. When a commercial doesn't know it's a commercial, I instinctually am sort of like, get the fuck away from me. But, so there is a sort of double-edged sword of yeah, it's like you want to be aware, but at the same time, you want it to sort of speak to something, because I don't know, that definitely, if I'm going to spend like at least a month of my life, working on this project, you got to find those things that are artistic and sort of beautiful or meaningful, to kind of make it palatable,
How much of this aesthetic beauty and artistic cinematic style did you have to fight for, or how much of it how much of it was asked for when it comes to the creative brief for this project in particular?
Yeah, this one was cool because like they from the outset they wanted it to have this kind of higher level, um, make it sort of feel like a fashion film, or uh, I don't know, some other brands that kind of speak to this more sort of elevated visual language, like Bose or like Rimowa or something. They say that it's like the Rimowa of strollers, or the actually they say it's the Bentley of strollers. Um, so it's kind of like, so that was in the DNA, that was like in the script. Like I thought, they had quite a lot of like very nice elevated references, which was the reason why like my reps thought it would be, a worthwhile project. It wasn't just like, that's what sort of like reeled me in, was that, it wasn't the fact that it was a stroller, which I think is a really unique challenge. The good thing is that it's kind of the object itself is quite well designed, so it doesn't. I never really had like a problem shooting it. Sometimes you like really avoid like the product because it's just ugly. Like I never really felt that with this.
Did it turn out to be what you had envisioned?
It was a weird project just because it was like my first job with ProdCo. So there's like a lot of pressure on that sort of first time with the new company. You want to like sort of set the tone, and I was like really pouring a lot into it. Um,
Yeah. And
and
ProdCo is the production company that you were just signed with.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. ProdCo to me is, it's like the culture there is something I've never quite experienced before, which is like this dedication to making the best commercial possible. Whereas at some other companies, it's a little bit of a mixed bag where it's like, you're there to serve the client, you're there to kind of get repeat business, make sure everyone's happy, you want to like check all the boxes. It's a little more like, but this is, ProdCo sort of uh, takes it to an extreme where it's like we just want to make like the coolest, most elevated work you possibly can. And I think that if that's your target, then the other stuff will kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
um
I would say they're doing it.
yeah,
And this commercial is an example of that.
yeah, well, thank you. um but I think it did turn out. Obviously some things were not, like when I was reading the treatment last night just to kind of like refresh. You always start with this kind of like overwrought conceptual, sort of lofty concept, and it kind of, it's, some of it makes it through, like I really tried to emphasize the sort of the psychedelic nature of parenthood, the sort of the this kind of weird, um POV thing. We didn't want it to be too like video game POV, like Oculus style. We were trying to like find a nice middle ground between, um, like seeing the world through the eyes of a baby, but then, um, also making it about the parents, because I think that's what an important realization I had early on, was that it's not really about the kids, it's about the parents. Like, parents are the ones buying the strollers. You have to make, you have to make it sort of, you want it to be sexy to the parents to be, or the new parents who are maybe gonna buy a stroller.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was gonna ask about the about this baby's POV here and get into the weeds technically a little
Yeah.
bit with you. I mean, it's a really interesting way to show the point of view of a newborn whose like vision hasn't fully developed yet. How did you guys do that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Me and Ollie Miller, we sort of, that was, I think that's what got him really interested in the project. Um, he really like latched onto that in our early conversations. Like, how do we show the world through the eyes of a baby, and like, this kind of watery metaphor. I don't know. I forget where. I guess because we were sort of going from like the womb, which is a sort of a watery environment, into the stroller, which is a kind of like, we wanted to create that feeling of being sort of safe. And then I think it was Ollie who just came up with this idea of putting like a little, we had to use a skater scope, because it's waterproof. Which I appreciate those things. Obviously, they're sort of overused, but in this case, I think the water, how it tends to have that kind of like CGI, like super crazy look to it, and you've probably seen it in every treatment, or every brief that comes in. It's like a shot of someone's eye, and like 9 times out of 10, it's like shot with this boroscope lens.
This shot here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, it's sort of obligatory kind of at this point. But in
I
this
mean,
case, I
dude,
think,
listen, I mean, yeah, I've seen a lot of eye shots. We've all seen it, but this one in particular is really nice. The detail of like the hairs on the face and everything. That's all
right,
in
right.
camera.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the effect I'm talking about. This effect of the skater scope. I mean,
Wow.
I like it because in our case, it has a narrative or conceptual purpose. Whereas I feel
Yeah.
like so much you see in commercials now, it's like style without substance, or I'm really big on style. I think style is super key. Like, I'm not knocking it, um, but style without saying anything. Like, if it's not expressing something specific, I really struggle with it. And in this
Yeah.
case, a shot of the eye makes sense because we're talking about vision, and it's followed in the edit by, like, or preceded by a POV, um this kind of
Yeah.
watery, where like things are still, the world is not yet formed, your perception is not yet formed, it's still kind of still forming. um yeah, it was a cool thing. It was tricky because the water moves quite quickly, the way it's in this little dish. It kind of like, it has the surface tension is very wobbly. And I was trying to get Ollie. I was like, can we put gelatin in it? Can we make it like more viscous? But um it just meant that we had to use like smaller pieces of the when the water was settling. That was like the best time. So
Man,
yeah.
that's so freaking cool. Now I know how practical you like to be with your effects, but there's some things I think you can't do practically, like the baby in a womb, like this shot here.
Yeah,
Is that
actually,
is that
yeah.
100% CG?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. ETC did that. And they did a really amazing job. Um, it was tricky because, I think, there was a lot of like sensitivity around, like, okay, we're gonna be inside the womb. Like, isn't that gonna be like very like kind of gruesome? And there is a kind of body horror element that you you kind of want to avoid, but at the same time, I didn't want to stylize the baby, because then it would look like some weird like Shutterstock kind of, CGI baby, like it would look bizarre. So to fit with the rest of the commercial, it needed to have some kind of realism, but also, being warm and inviting and not too
Yeah,
like gross.
that's a hard line. That's a hard line
Yeah.
to walk because
Yeah,
this could be a very gruesome shot if you didn't do it the right way.
exactly. And there was a bit, I think in the edit there was a few moments of panic where it was like, hey, this is not the like stylized silhouette that we talked about. There's like we're seeing a lot of like veins and things, and I'm like, well,
Looking at this shot of this praying mantis here, this looks like a lot of time, a lot of pieces. Can you just tell me how you guys did this?
yeah, we wasted a lot of time on this. This was actually our only casting that was like a father and a daughter. I liked this actor, and he had this very cute daughter. We were able to kind of, I think it helps a little bit in keeping the kids engaged and not crying, but not always. I mean, this little girl was still pretty tricky. Every time he showed her the bug, she would like scream and cry, and it was getting to this point where like we had to put like other things in his hand to kind of like sort of trick her into like looking. But she didn't like the bug. She really didn't like the bug. Even when it was a butterfly, she would like start crying. So this was like a whole sand pit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can imagine. I've shot with kids. I've shot with kids enough to know
Yeah,
what a beautiful headache it can be.
yeah,
But
yeah.
this close up here, I mean, is this something you guys shot after? Did you shoot with talent first and get the shots that involved the girl out of the way first, and then went close up
Right.
for the bug, or did you guys do something
Um,
else?
no, we tried to do it in one. Like this was actually supposed to be a shot of the guy, and then you see the girl in the same shot.
Oh,
And
nice.
what we wasted all this time shooting like a green screen version of this, where we like shot the girl's plate,
Oh, wow.
shot the hands separately, and we tried to like merge them together, but it just looked too like silly, too cartoonish. So we went for this kind of more subtle, yeah. But the mantis was cool. I loved the mantis.
It's really cool. I actually didn't even notice the guy back there. I was so enthralled with the bug.
I thought, the mantis was going to be too edgy. It has certain connotations of death, but they liked it. They wanted it to be like a little bit edgy. And that was actually a very funny moment. The first presentation, when I showed them the boards, they were like, "Ah, Alex, like, we love it, but, there's a lot of like smiling babies. Like that's not very cool. We'd want it." And I was just
Yeah.
like so embarrassed because, I just kind of assumed that, that's the genre we're working in, and like that's what they wanted to see. You never want to be caught on the other side of like where like the agency wants it to be cooler. Like as a director, you need to be like pushing that
Yeah.
side of things. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, like okay, let me back up. Like,
Wow.
excuse me, sorry.
That's so wild to watch it, to know that it worked in the other direction that
Mm.
time, where they were pushing you to be a little edgier with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you can that's the I would say like one of the pitfalls of commercial filmmaking is like when you stop, like when you try to cater to the client, or you become too aware of what you're doing, and you're not just sort of blindly pushing the most coolest, creative, tasteful thing you possibly can. And when you're kind of like, well, it is for a stroller, like we should have some smiling kids, like when you start thinking like that, I think that's when you can kind of, I don't know, you can go astray. Like I think it's better to just stick to your guns and just because
Yeah.
they can always pull you back, but yeah, you don't want to be caught on the other side. Yeah.
This shot here is like one of the first things I saw about the piece and went, okay, this really stands out to me. What is going on here behind her? Did you guys do something
Um,
in post, or is that just the mechanics of the background there?
wow, what a nice compliment. I actually did this. I did the VFX on this shot. Um,
Nice.
they because like ETC did a version that um I think was in the client cut. And it was nice, but I thought it was just a little too extreme. Like if
Yeah.
it was more sort of warping happening, and I was like, oh, I want it to be more subtle.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went back in and I like rotoed her and did my own little janky version for the
Yeah.
director's cut.
Dude, I love it. It's the most subtle things, you know. People try and go overboard with stuff, and I think sometimes if you barely notice it, it's like the right level.
Yeah, totally.
This shot here, this overhead of the umbrellas, it's just iconic. I mean, I absolutely love it. What were you, this whole scene in the rain, what were you going for here? What did you want us to feel?
I thought, again, sort of like these visual rhymes. We're in the bassinet. We're kind of covered. There's a sense of like safety and comfort and sort of being ensconced. I think that's like a kind of prime baby experience, is this feeling of being swaddled and kind of like, buried in blankets and things. And I was trying to, I think that's what was sort of the subtext of this idea of like umbrellas kind of creating this like warm sort of bubble in a cold, rainy, rain shower. Kind of mimicking this feeling of being in a womb a little bit. I don't know. I don't even know if that was intentional. Like, I don't think I ever thought that. I just came up with that now, but it it totally sort of plays into this, theme of like water and then being inside of a pod, you know?
Isn't it funny that, like, I mean, you may have come up with that and done it intentionally or maybe unintentionally, which I think is more interesting to me, how we
Yeah.
unintentionally create this way.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so much like subconscious process that's happening when you're designing these images. Um, that yeah, if you're doing your job right, like I think the images will start to rhyme with each other, whether you're aware of it or not, and then you get these kind of lovely synchronicities that kind of sort of permeate the whole thing and make it feel more cohesive and kind of yeah, intentional.
This moving light gag here, you didn't have to do that, but you did. What were you going for?
There was a whole kind of like part of the original script was they wanted it to be like what you're seeing is the sort of anthem film, but then there was all these other films that were kind of packed into the shoot that were more product focused, and one of the concepts was to have it be like, I think the reference was like this the shot in Twilight where like the seasons are passing and the camera's rotating and there's this like sense of time is passing. I think in this case, like it doesn't, like going back to that thing about making sure that the style has a purpose. This whole thing is about time and like thinking about the future and sort of, or the decision to have a kid is sort of you're projecting into the future.
I mean, maybe we're looking into it too much. Because here's the thing.
Maybe.
Maybe. Here's the thing. If it's
Yeah.
motivated, which it is,
Yeah, it's
it
motivated.
works. You can get away with anything stylistically if it's even lightly motivated.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the product here? You kind of touched on that earlier, but what was it like showcasing this product? Did you what was the client and agency side of it like?
They were cool. There was definitely like, we had to show, there was a lot of like guidelines about showing the stroller. There was a hero angle. There was like a sort of three-quarter angle that was important. Like you had to hold it in a certain way. So there was all these kind of like technical things. You had to have
Sure.
this like strap, like just like legal. There's all, the sort of the legal part of it is like, you always have to show it like safely strapped to the woman's hand. Things like that, so like there was people on set that were kind of guiding us. I think they also understood that this isn't about cramming the product into every shot. Like they also, like again, sort of going back to that, like sort of creating this sort of creative conspiracy. Like they understood that it's about the parents. It's about showing the emotion of the people. It's not the product. The product is sort of incidental. It's about the It's about the hero, the casting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with commercials like this, things can get out of balance. To me, this is a
Yeah.
commercial that's got a good balance of showing the product while making me feel something, saying a message while showing the use of the product. Like you have 2 points of views that complement each other.
Mhm.
It's just a
Mhm.
great piece, man. I think you've done a really
Thank
great
you.
job with it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Anything else to say about it? Is that, any lightning in the bottle moments, any one thing that made it what it is?
Well, I do have a sort of strange story to tell about it. It speaks to something interesting about filmmaking in general. A little bit, it's a little bit more on a sort of mystical, sort of spiritual side of things. Um, so I got really sick while we were making this. Uh, Came down with some sort of like terrible fever, like a few days after I landed in Thailand. Um, and without making it seem like I'm like a massive hypochondriac or anything, but um, a few months before, I had been bitten by a dog, a street dog in the Yucatan. Um, and it was kind of I was taking photographs and a pack of dogs kind of, I surprised them by accident, and I got like nipped in the leg, and it wasn't like a bad bite. I don't think it broke my skin, but there was just enough. There was a sort of mark there. It was just enough to be like, huh, that's weird. Like that's kind of concerning. And I was like, should I get a rabies shot? I was with my parents. It was on Christmas holiday, and they're like, nah, don't worry about it. That's nothing, whatever. Um, and so, because I know the thing about rabies is that once you have it, it's like a death sentence. You can't. There's no going back. Once the symptoms set in, you have about like 10 days, and then you die one of the most like top five horrific deaths.
Oh, it sucks big time.
Oh, it's really scary. And like just a few months prior to this, I had seen sort of in my feed, in my Twitter feed, there was kind of that account that's like morbid
Oh yeah.
blah blah, and it's like, and it was like some videos of like people who've like they're being recorded with like sort of late stage of rabies. um so it's just like in my head, right? Anyway, so long story, so I'm in Thailand, and I didn't get the vaccine, so I didn't go, like you're supposed to go immediately and get this, like it's like 4 shots plus hemoglobulin, like you're supposed to do this whole sort of regimen of shots and vaccines. And I'm in Thailand. I start getting a fever, and then all of a sudden my jaw starts to ache. And I've like never had, I've been sick before. I've never had a jaw ache. Like that's not something that's like ever happened to me, where like I start feeling, and that's one of the classic, if you Google it, it's like one of the first things that comes up is that, you get lockjaw. And so there was this period, and so this is like a few days into the
Were
prep.
you just like all out panicking?
Yeah, I was having a spiritual moment. I have to say, it was an intense,
Yeah.
but I couldn't tell anybody about it.
Or else.
It was too crazy. Like the thought
Yeah.
that this could be my last shoot. Like, and I didn't know. It's so ambiguous. Like there's just enough ambiguity
Yeah.
where it's like, could it be rabies? Like it could be,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
probably not. Like the chances are super low, but it's
So how did it play
but
out? Were
so
you shooting with this mindset of I might die soon?
yes. So like
Brother.
I had to like really hold it together and pretend like nothing was happening.
Yeah.
Um, but
Wow.
eventually I kind of was like to my producer, I was like, listen, man, this is gonna sound really weird. I don't want you're gonna think I'm like a hypochondriac, crazy person, like, but there's a confluence of events. It's just I can't ignore it. It's a sort of a pattern, like so. I'm in this like mental state. I feel like we should get this figured out. So anyway, we went to the hospital, you can't really get tested for it. This is the other thing. You do like a spit test, and we're in this like Thai hospital, which is like very high end. It's almost like a kind of a medical spa, and they're just like, sort of, they're like, yeah, sorry, we can't really help you, like, and I'm like, well, can you, they gave me a test, but it was like, it'll be, the results will be here in 10 days, because it's such a rare thing. Like, there isn't any, like,
Right.
the shoot was in 4 days, and I would get my answer in 10 days. And, so it was like just having to go through prep, thinking about that. Okay. And like, here's the sort of point of the story is like, I don't know, there's a kind of a weird balance always, I feel like, in some of these, and a sort of a balancing of the scales. Like, we're doing this project that's all about like life and birth, and then here I am thinking that I'm having a kind of virtual near-death experience. I say virtual because it's like, it's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. It's like, do I or don't I? It's like simultaneously
Yeah.
this, there's no way to know. And
Yeah. So unknown.
and so there was this like very strange, like very psychedelic experience, which is, and it's weird because like that was like my whole sort of MO is like, this is going to be, it's like a reverse Enter the Void. It's going to be like a kind of a happy version of that, but it's, I want it to be psychedelic. Like, that's how I was able to make Stroller cool to me personally, is that.
Yeah.
And of course, that's like the kind of classic psychedelic experience as a counter with sort of, the ego death of mortality and whatever. So there's this sort of strange,
Yeah. Pre-birth.
like an irony, a sort of supreme irony. And I think you encounter this a lot in film production, because you're going out into the world and you're agitating you're doing a lot of cause and effect, more than a normal person in a single day. You're sort of, you're bothering all these, you're making all these little waves, with what you're shooting, with like the people you're bringing into it. It's such a massive undertaking that I feel like it kind of opens you up to these sort of weird synchronicities,
Yeah.
And I feel like that's it made it incredibly memorable, obviously. But I think that's true about so many projects. I'm sure you've had projects where, things work out just so, or like in the most ironic way possible, or, like it's weird how that can kind of happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've had experiences like that, but never like, I think I'm gonna die the whole shoot, you know?
Yeah.
So what ended up happening?
Okay, so the other key thing was that rabies can incubate up to a year, and you don't know if you have it or not. It just like hides in your nervous system. So like that was the thing that blew my mind, was that like,
Yeah.
I could be in this like state of like not knowing for so long. It was like unthinkable. But anyway, so we're shooting in the tunnel, the pushing the stroller in the tunnel, and my producer, who Tom, he was like a good buddy to have in this situation. He was very very calming and comforting, and he was like, he shows up, he's like, it's the hospital, it's like the doctor, they want to talk to you, they've got the results. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, they want to talk to me? I have to get like, and then like I'm sweating. I'm like, why do they want to talk to, like, what the fuck? So I'm like, no, you answer the phone. You do it. I can't, like, I just couldn't. And so he's like, the test came back negative. And I like literally like jumped up into the air. And I just like, I ran back to the camera where Ollie was, and I just like, I don't know, I was so pumped. But that wasn't the end of the story, because it took, once this like seed gets planted, it really sticks with you. And it was only like a few months later that I finally like went and got the proper vaccine, and kind of like put it to bed forever.
Wow.
Um,
What an
but
insane story, dude.
dude, yeah,
I can imagine the feeling you had when you got those results. Like a new
oh
lease
yeah,
on life type of thing, I'm sure.
yeah. But the thing about the result, at the very bottom of the page, like this is like the irony of it all. It's like, one result does not guarantee that you do not have rabies. It is like, and you're just like, no. But it was like enough of a, it got me through the shoot, let's say.
It's amazing that you could create um, at the level that you guys did through being in that place emotionally, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that it was a testament to also to Ollie. I think I really, at the end of it, I was like, dude, you saved my ass.
That's a crazy story, dude. Thanks for sharing. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks like most of your work experience has been predicated on music videos over commercials. But what do you think you still have to learn when it comes to directing pieces for the commercial world?
As you go through your career, you kind of collect advice, and you sort of slowly start to integrate these things into your process, like little good rules of thumb, or like, good habits. And every time you get a chance to make a commercial, it's sort of like another chance to like remember all the things that, you've worked up over the years as being like helpful to you. Um, and so it's kind of like in tennis when you feel like you're playing really poorly, and then you remember like, oh yeah, you got to keep your eye on the ball. And it's like that one little change that like, okay, and then you're like suddenly your game is like way better. So there's like that element of it. It's like trying not to forget what you've learned.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a question, it's a line of questioning that I love because when
Hmm.
you look at someone like you who's created work on the highest level that is so cool, I kind of want to know, and I want to know this about myself, but like, what am I not good at? What's the thing that's gonna bone me? You know, how do I get in my own way? You know what I mean? Do you have any of that for yourself that you're at least aware of?
Integrating that, like what I was talking about earlier about not knowing and being comfortable with like the not knowing, can't always apply to commercial filmmaking. So it's like you have to be you have to make decisions very early, and sometimes I struggle with that. Like I like to keep things open as much as possible. So you're sort of fighting those two impulses to like, do you sort of collapse reality and around, you make that casting choice and suddenly you're locked in, and then you can kind of like move forward, or do you keep it open, and I think that's something I'm always struggling with, is probably delaying those decisions to like the very last moment, when I could probably, if I like, was working more intuitively, or just being more decisive. I think every director struggles with that, you know, how to be decisive. Um, which, it to me, there's another sort of like little anecdote about, you know, this definitely applies to commercial filmmaking, is like producers, to sort of show that you're like a strong director, you have to be, authoritative and decisive. But to me, that's not really like how good things are made. Like, this one time a producer was like, you and the DP are so funny because you just stand there and you go, I don't know, what do you think? And then the other guy goes, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? Which is like, is classic. But to me, that's like, that's that's creativity. Like that's the process.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think is like the magic words. Like as a director, I think that's so important to remember that, because you know using your first of all, you're bringing your collaborators into it. You know, you're you're letting the moment speak to you. If you come in and you're just like a commander and you're ready to sort of move gear around, like that doesn't really it serves whatever, the kind of nuts and bolts of commercial filmmaking, but not the creativity of it, where that does it still exists. Like you sort of have to make space for that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's times I've definitely felt where the crew, the people, the powers that be, they're expecting you to be the director with all the answers. And
Yeah.
sometimes you got to fake that a little bit.
Oh yeah. Definitely got to fake it. Yeah, that was sort of a bullshit answer to your question. It didn't. I kind of was like a long-winded, roundabout way of like, what are my weaknesses? Yeah, it's like in a job interview, and they're like, yeah, like what could you work on? And then you like turn it into actually like,
To a strength.
yeah, like I really just care too much. Sometimes I
The
just
problem with me is I give a shit way too much.
I'm just too passionate. Actually, that's like
Uh,
yeah, it gets me in trouble a lot.
there's plenty of things about the process that are pressure, um, but I notice that, at least with me, every project, at least the ones I really care about, they seem to come with like this torment, usually within myself. Do you relate to that?
Oh yeah.
Do you think torment belongs in the process of making something good?
Early on, I was more tormented. The older I get and the more I do this, the less it affects me. But there's no art without some sort of sacrifice, I think.
Sure. Oh
And
yeah.
the sacrifice is your own sort of emotional well-being, or sometimes that's what's being sacrificed, this kind of feeling of comfort, of self-esteem that you're sort of carefully constructing. And then you're as you push into any project at every stage, there's going to be moments where that is disrupted, and that doesn't feel good. There's like, but you're kind of like, I'm going to bear this because that the end result is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I can relate to that.
and but
100%.
yeah,
Well, we
and
like
like,
prove it to ourselves. It's like, anytime we've made something really good, it's come with this torment. So we associate that with like, well, if I'm sacrificing all this, it means that the thing will be good. But it's
yeah,
like that also goes into another thing where it's like we're identifying with our work. And I've talked about this with past guests on the podcast where it's like if the work is good, then I'm good. If the work is bad, then I am bad. It's a whole nother dangerous thing.
oh yeah, where you sort of identify too closely with your sort of creative output. But I don't mind that. I think that's part of the, I don't know, the Pyrrhic kind of romance of being a creative person, is that's kind of tragic self-identification is sort of, I don't see any problem with that. Some people say that their life is not their work and the life is separate, but I don't really see it that way.
Yeah. Why?
It's a mode of To me, it's a mode of relating to reality, and I think filmmaking is part of that. Like you could say, I always, in defense of spirituality or religion, I always say it's just a kind of a way of orientating yourself towards reality. And for me, like art making or filmmaking is a way of relating to reality, and it's a kind of like a filter. And um so you it's like how things come in and how you interpret this kind of strange experience we're all having, and then also how you put back into it. So it's like it's so connected, it's so related. Like I don't see life being separate.
It's so connected, man. I have a hard time going on vacation without a camera. Like, 'cause like I will have a moment where I don't have a choice to shoot something or exercise my creativity, and then I go, what am I supposed to do? What is this? What am I? Part of enjoying a place is my chase to capture an image from it. And when you
100%.
remove that, then it's like, can I even enjoy the place? And I don't know if I like that idea, but it's like my reality sometimes, Alex.
Yeah, we're the same. Yeah, it was funny because my girlfriend is often frustrated by my, like, I do not like vacation. Um, it just doesn't like, this is like, again, this is like part of this like unhealthy cycle where it's like, I only feel comfortable cutting loose or going on vacation after I've like done a job, or like done some sort of like big work, and I'm like, I can like, I'm rewarded for this difficult thing I've just gone through. But yeah, and like, but going on like, again, this thing about relating to reality, like, going on vacation, unless you are really good at it, it's like a skill. And I think some people have it, some people don't. I'm sort of in the middle. I don't, I can't like just go to a bar and like make a bunch of weird friends and I go on this like crazy adventure. Like sometimes that happens, but more often I'm like a little too shy and like reserved. Um, but yeah, but like typically you're just on the surface of things, and you're kind of you're sort of, you feel like a tourist. You're not really like, I don't know, you're not getting behind the facade, and that's what I love about filmmaking, is that it really lets you like, to first of all, you're meeting all these interesting people, you're meeting local people in wherever you're working, and they're introducing you to, you know, things that they love about their city and whatever, and like, um and you have a reason to be there also. There's a kind of like, there's a bit of more of like a telos, like you can kind of, you're taking a photograph, and you're not just like a weird tourist or a creepo, like prying into other people's lives. Like there's a kind of, there's a reason to do it. And
It's amazing what the camera allows you to do,
mhm.
in places that you're completely foreign to.
Yeah,
There's been places where I like don't want to look people in the eyes, but I can look at my camera and then look at them that way, and it
yeah.
feels so much more comfortable.
Are you a comfortable street photographer, or do you feel like,
I am if I have a camera. Yeah, if there's a camera between me and the actual person, we're groovy, man. We're good. But the second
right?
you remove the camera, I mean, it's not that I can't, but
Yeah,
it's certainly it gives, it's like that camera is permission for me to like, yeah, express myself, but also just get front row seat to wherever I want.
yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm working on that because I am a little bit shy when it comes to, if I'm walking around with a camera, but if I'm with a film crew, different story. Suddenly, then there's even more permission to kind of like, to kind of go farther than I would. I'm still like a little timid when it comes to like sort of street photographers or street photography. And I've always admired photographers who can really get into and sort of enmesh in people's lives. Like Eugene Richards might be like the greatest example of that, or Gregory Halpern, or these people who are like almost like photojournalists in that sense of connecting with people. But
Yeah, but when you're part of a film set, you have extra permission to be there.
yeah, I mean, it's a luxury, and you know uh it's you're kind of spoiled in that way, I think.
100%. 100%. Okay, I made you vulnerable and I made you have to talk about a thing you're not good at. But give me an example of when you like took a moment, stepped back and thought, man, I just did the thing that I'm good at.
uh it's hard to, because that always comes like way later, that feeling, like, because going back to this feeling of like terror and anguish is, that's usually like the first, even after I'm done making something, like I'm kind of, you feel there's like it's the ugly baby syndrome. You're like, ugh, like, what have I done? What is this? Like, ugh. And then it's only after like you get like a proper critical distance that you can like, you know, look at your work and be like, that was fucking crazy. I can't believe we did that. I don't know. One thing that I'm very proud of, um, for a couple reasons, would be the video I did for Alt J 3WW. You know, it contains all the things that I think are sort of flawed about my approach, which is like too, you know, overly ambitious, trying to cram in too much narrative into the story, or into the music video. These things that I think might be flaws, but then at the same time it's like, no, but that's also what make it so like weird and unique. And just like the whole, like that one specifically was it was like an adventure shoot. That was one where there was like all kinds of like bizarre synchronicities, and I felt like we really sort of tapped into like the wave, or like the wavelength of you know, on sort of every level. We kept like discovering these like strange things where, like, you know, the town that we shot in, that we sort of chose at random, you know, like the story we were telling, like we had a few, you know, days of prep, and I went to this like weird little museum. It was like a little gift shop, but it had like a museum, and I saw like photographs that were like basically what we were about to shoot, just there, you know. And like it's just things like that, like whatever, you know. It's like it's not magic, but there's a kind of like that it was such a, you know, we were scouting on horseback, and like, because like cars couldn't go where we wanted to shoot, you know, like those types of things. Like that to me is like real sort of like adventure filmmaking. And yeah, I don't know, I thought that was that kind of like brought together all the sort of the things that I think that make my work a little like more unique,
Yeah.
or just all kind of came together into a project that, you know, even when it was finished, I wasn't like, we did it, you know. There was a period of like, did we do it? Like, I don't know, you know. But then slowly, you know, as you sort of integrate the experience, you kind of come out of it being like, yeah, that was beautiful. That was like a beautiful experience. And also something that the lead actress told me, you know, while we were there was a the Huichol tribe was gathering for a peyote ceremony. It was like this like special time of the year where all the sort of like the pilgrims come through the desert. And so while we're shooting, there's these like little groups of people in these amazing sort of white costumes kind of like coming up the mountain. And it was like really sort of strange and trippy. And the, you know, like our lead actress Luba, she was like, you know, I didn't have to do the peyote. Like the video was the peyote. Like that was the sort of transformative experience. Like all the emotions that, you know, like the drama of both on camera and off camera, you know, like there was a lot of drama, a lot of like, you know, when you're sort of exposed to the elements, and you know, you're sunburnt and you're dehydrated, and you're, you know, there's problems and people are crying, and you know, like this, that's like, it's a whole cathartic ritual, you know. The video itself is a ritual.
Yeah.
You know, and that was like, I wish every project had a little bit of that in it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of questions, what question haven't I asked you? Wrapping up here, is there anything that I missed? A question I don't know how to ask?
Yeah, I don't know. Like we talked a little bit about sort of the state of the industry. Kind of didn't get into that, which is sort of maybe good. I don't know.
No, I mean,
What's to say about it?
I kind of want to know. It sounds like you have something to say about it. I mean, can you just tell me what you think about AI?
Obviously, the conversation gets very skewed because, you know, you have these, basically people are reacting to the vanguard, the sort of the AI vanguard, who are like pushing it hard, you know. And it's like the people on Twitter who are like, you know, we're like liberating creators, like we're, you know, this is the new wave, we're going to disrupt Hollywood. And you know, like, And so people have this like visceral reaction to that, um, which is, I think valid to kind of push against that. Because what I sort of notice about a lot of these, this is a bit of like a straw man in a way, but these people exist. But, these kind of like AI filmmakers who are kind of branding themselves as like, we're getting in early, like this is going to be my thing and I'm going to like, ride this wave. It's like you can just tell that they've never really like made anything before, like, because like if you really like had made a film, if you've gone out there, it's not difficult to go out and make something like, talk about like democratization of whatever filmmaking. Like it's not impossible to go and get your friends together and like make something. I mean, that's what every like old fogey like filmmaker says, like shoot it on your phone, whatever. But it's true. Like it's but there is a certain amount of like again, there's this, you have to make the sacrifice of going out and doing it. And I think for us, like the purpose is the process. It's the process that you love. Like you don't love the result. Like you're talking about, like, there's you don't make a film and be like, oh fuck, I can't wait to share this one.
Yeah, the process is half of it. The final result is half of it. So you're telling
Exactly.
me that the new wave of filmmaking removes half, if not more than half, of what I actually like about this thing. And
Right. Like,
I'm just not interested.
yeah, exactly. Like yeah, like what it doesn't, it even like on the most selfish level, it doesn't give you what you want. It's like, that's I think the addiction that we have is like the being on set and the kind of, the high that gives you. Like there's always this moment on set. It's happened, well, it still happens to me where I'm like, some quiet moment, usually when like nothing's happening, where I'm just like, there's just this like surge of adrenaline and endorphins, and I'm like, I love this. This is like this is I'm never gonna give this up. This is the best job in the world. Like that, it happens on every shoot, and that's why you do it. You don't do it because like you're trying to make like slick images or whatever. Like, and there's this whole sort of the kind of like text to image model. It's like a little bit of like a slot machine. It's like hit the button again. There's this like addictive quality of like,
Yeah.
you know, um,
Mm.
and then whatever comes out, it looks like a video game cutscene or whatever. But even if it didn't, even if it like looked interesting.
Yeah, it definitely like doesn't get me excited. Some other people it does. I understand how it can be used as a tool. I mean that's a different use case, and I'm
A
all about
tool,
that.
yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, because you can't, like, again, it kind of goes back to that thing of allowing like reality. And it's like when you take something from the imaginal realm and then you combine it with reality, there's going to be like, an explosion or something. Something's going to happen that's like wholly unique. It's like that thing I was saying about how like you could be in a dark room and you could just be like, coming up with ideas. But until that, chances are some of those ideas are just like regurgitations of experiences or things that you've seen before. And so without that like interface with like the kind of the limitations
Yeah.
of the world, like you're never gonna get that kind of third thing, that is more than the sum of its parts. Because like the AI is always going to be kind of just the sum of its parts. But I think the
Yeah.
going out, doing it, sweating, bleeding, uh, that's what gives it the sort of the magic quality that, I don't know, that makes it worth doing for us. Like not even talking about the audience. Like I'm not even sure what the audience, I think obviously people's taste and like appetite is gonna, I hard to predict. I think it's always gonna be like a race to the bottom. We've seen it in every other industry. The like what people will tolerate, in terms of like just like crappy nonsense, like that, just like AI generated music. I've had this just this week alone. I've had like in my Discover Weekly, I've discovered 3 songs that are just absolute, like made up, like not like fake artists, like fake music, fake
Really? And
everything.
and you know that?
Yeah, well, because you click on it and it's got some like insane name. Like, let me see, what was it?
I live by my Discover Weekly. If you're
Oh
telling me
yeah,
that
which
there's a
is
percentage
sad.
of that Discover Weekly is AI, it's a little disappointing.
Oh yeah, and this is like the first time it's happened, but like something called Fretch cheese, uh, Bizag Voigags, Guyal. Like it's just like absolute gibberish. And it like as it's playing, you kind of like, you don't notice it right away, but slowly like it comes into your awareness. You're like, what? What am I listening to?
I'm
And
gonna
I
keep
feel
my
like
ear open for that.
yeah, you got to be careful, man, because it like it sounds like, it's a simulation of like tasteful, you know, uh, ambient music or whatever, but there's something missing. And, I don't know, maybe one day it'll become indistinguishable. Um, but then,
That's the
yeah, I
scary
don't know.
part, isn't it? That's what
Yeah,
people are worried about, is it's
yeah,
indistinguishable.
totally. Like as image, like slick looking images are sort of flood the kind of like media landscape. I think there might, like, this is like the one positive thing I'll say about AI is that like the easier it becomes to create like, perfect, super kind of like glossy images, the less important image becomes. And there might be a kind of like, then it becomes more about like concept and intent and narrative. And maybe we can see a kind
Yeah.
of like return, a sort of pendulum can kind of swing back the other
Yeah.
way.
I could see
You
that
know?
possibility. Yeah, because when it comes down to it, people don't want to see just beautiful images. That's not why people go watch movies. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, at least most movies, you know what I mean? I think it's like it's helpful for immersion, if you want to be immersed into a setting, but at least the narratives, the movies that I like, the ones that I want to create one day, the ones that you want to create, it's like actually has nothing to do with just how beautiful the image looks alone. It has a lot to do with, yeah, actor's performance, but the things you find along the way as you're creating it, and that authenticity that I think AI will never be able to recreate. At least I hope not. I mean, that's the stuff I think we want to chase. And the idea of a pendulum swing.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I mean, I don't have my hopes up, but it does happen. I think that in the same way that like photography is no longer sort of, uh it's not a document of truth anymore. And so like our relationship to photography has changed, you know, over the 20th century. And this is kind of a similar effect where, video is no longer a document of truth.
Well, the exciting thing is that there's a lot of people out there. There's a huge appetite for people to escape their own reality and be immersed in a story. And
Yeah.
that appetite, I don't think like the demand is going nowhere. And exactly how creators like us feed that demand and create in our own way, in our own voices for people to be transported. Um, you know, I'm kind of okay with it going wherever it needs to go and just seeing how I fit into it. I mean, that's just how it's always worked, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Um, I think people will always be looking for communication. Like I was thinking about that today. Like, there, it's not so much about like storytelling. I think storytelling in general as a concept is like almost like a misdirection. Um, Narrative, and certainly as storytelling might be a little broad. Maybe like plot driven things are kind of, it's like a little bit of a misdirection. To me, it's like the core of it is really about communicating something, relating to from like human to human, whereas like plot can be imitated. You know what I mean? Like narrative can be imitated by a machine.
Anything else for me? I mean, like a lot of people who watch this podcast just want to create work like yours, and or on high level in general. You know,
Yeah.
is there anything you have to say to people who are just wanting to elevate their career or build their craft?
Maybe just to kind of pick like one thing specific. It's like, go with the flaw. Go with the thing that makes you unique. That's probably the most important thing at this point. Like when it feels like the landscape is like flooded, not only with like AI, but it's also sort of a human problem too. There's like so much stuff. There's so many images being created, so much is being generated, and there's so much like mimetic people copying, trying to crib other people to sort of, it's like mood board cinema is like now, it's like instead of becoming something specific, a film is a kind of like checkbox of like, it's almost like a word cloud of like references, like even, I don't know, a movie like The Substance, it's like, it's packed with all these like references to other films, and it kind of become, which I think is, which is part of a larger trend of like everything is referential. Marvel movies is like an entire cinema based on like referring to other movies. It's, I think it's important to like strip all that away and try to find that like unique thing that is your unique obsession. I have all these like really niche areas of interest, and it's like, oh, that'll never make a good feature film, or like no one would ever be into that, and like every director has those things, right? Like those kinds of like crazy scripts, and like some producer will tell them like, yeah, that's dope, but um that's not genre, or like, that's too weird, whatever. But it's like those are the precious things that are actually like valuable, I think.
I mean, are you referring to more like A24 movies that are a little genreless?
Yeah, or
They're kind of
yeah,
a genre of their own now, aren't they?
a genre of their own. Yeah. But even just genre in general, like those are the only movies that are getting, greenlit. It's like it has to fit into a genre. It can't, like there's little room for this kind of like,
For that amount of risk to be taken.
yeah. But that's this, I don't know, like that's the stuff that's worth fighting for. So yeah, just you gotta just like keep fighting for it. You know, you gotta show like passion for it, even if you think like the first sign of resistance, like you have your idea, you have a short you want to make, you have a script you're working on, you're gonna like you're gonna try to tease it to people around you to kind of get a read, and like you're gonna meet resistance. Like as a director, you're kind of on your own. Like you're the only one who has like the full vision, who the you're the one with the best taste, the most elevated taste, to yourself. But the people that are around you that are going to be helping you make this whatever you're trying to make, they may not have the same references that you do, but
Right.
what they're looking for is like your passion. That's something that you can communicate. They may not get the films that you like, but they
Right.
can see that you're crazy about it.
Dude,
You know,
yeah. Sometimes if I am pushing the limits on something or going in a weird direction, it helps to have validation from someone I trust to say, "Hey, it's weird, but it's worth it." Do you need
yeah.
that, or do you not need that? Where you're like, I don't care what anything.
I sent something to Dustin Lane the other day, like a short thing I'm working on, and just to get he's like, I'm 100% on board. Like to me that is, I'm like, great, because like that's someone that I see as like a peer and whose taste I like admire and trust.
Yes.
And so it's like that, then it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. There's something here. How can I then, bring in people who are not in this, do not have the same references and have not seen all the slow cinema, whatever that like Dustin and I like.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I think like part of being like a good EP or like running a production company or being a sort of producer is just like half of it is just being like, hell yes, this is awesome. Like, let's go. Like, let's do this.
Yeah, just being a hype person.
Yeah, as a hype person, because it's like half the struggle is just like keeping the energy alive, keeping the momentum going,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, Alex Takacs, thanks so much for being on the podcast and having this amazing conversation with me and giving us your point of view.
Dylan, thank you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was fun.